The sun had just begun to sink behind the terracotta rooftops of Firenze, casting long golden shadows across the narrow cobblestone alleys. The bells of Santa Croce rang out over the city, a deep, melancholic toll that seemed to resonate with the very bones of the ancient walls. Amidst this twilight beauty, few would imagine the secrets buried beneath the marble and moss. Firenze, in the 14th century, was a paradox in stone, a cradle of culture and invention, yet also a cauldron of silent rivalries, veiled loyalties, and deadly intent. Beneath its vibrant marketplaces and glorious cathedrals lay a darker network, an underground society of code, whispers, and blood. And within that world moved Alaric Valen. Alaric was no ordinary man. Raised in the orphanage of San Domenico, after a fire ravaged his family estate, he was plucked from obscurity at the age of 10 by a woman cloaked in midnight blue. Her name was Seraphine Leclerc, and her eyes saw more than just potential, they saw fate. She brought him into the fold of the Veiled Thorn, a clandestine order of assassins who operated not for coin, but for cause. Their creed was not carved in stone, but burned into the mind. Silence is the highest form of power. In a world where kings shouted commands and nobles flaunted wealth, the Thorn moved through silence, and silence was how they ruled. At 17, Alaric had learned to move without sound, to breathe with the rhythm of shadows, to see danger where others saw peace. Yet he had never taken a life. That threshold once crossed was irreversible. The city called to him that evening, not with charm, but with mystery. A note had arrived by Raven, sealed in violet wax. No signature, no instructions. Only a time, a location, and a single line. Stand where the sun last kisses the Arno. Alaric stood on the edge of the Ponte Vecchio, hands clasped behind his back, heart as calm as the ripples below. The city breathed around him, merchants packing their stalls, children laughing in courtyards, priests whispering vespers. He felt no danger, yet every hair on his arm stood alert. That's when she appeared, clad in a gown that glimmered like dying fire, her face veiled beneath scarlet lace. The woman moved like liquid flame. Her name was Cataran d'Or, though Alaric would not learn it until much later. That night, she was merely the messenger. "You are late," she said softly, though Alaric had been early. "You are early," he replied, a small smile betraying his curiosity. She handed him a small scroll parchment. Worn and old, and disappeared into the crowd before another word could be exchanged. Inside, the words bled with urgency. "Firenze will fall from within. The Thorn is compromised. Trust only the unseen. Go to the garden. Begin your true training." The note was unsigned, but Alaric knew Seraphine's hand. Her warning was a whisper wrapped in riddles. Yet its meaning was clear. His world was about to shift, and so was the code he had been raised to obey. Nestled deep in the Apennine Mountains, hidden beneath layers of rock and legends, was a place known only as Il Giardino del Lemna, Garden of Blades. No maps marked it, no travelers stumbled upon it, and yet it existed, guarded by nature, protected by fear. After receiving the warning scroll in Firenze, Alaric obeyed Seraphine's cryptic instruction. 3 days of travel through dangerous forests and misty ridgelines brought him to an ancient monastery ruin. Vines crept over stone. Silence hung like incense. But beneath the chapel ruins was a narrow stairwell, descending into the earth like a vein of shadow. The garden was not a place of flowers, but of steel. Polished blades hung from trellises like strange fruit. Training arenas were carved into natural rock. Echoes of past battles seemed to hum through the walls. This was where the Thorn's elite were born or broken. Waiting for him was Seraphine Leclerc herself. Cloaked in silence, older than Alaric remembered, but sharper, somehow. Her presence alone made men stand straighter, breaths slower. Yet to Alaric, she was still the woman who saved him from loneliness. The only figure from his past that felt solid. "You survived the test," she said simply. Now comes the purpose. He bowed low. The city has changed. No, she replied. You have, and that's why you're here. The training begins. What followed were weeks that felt like years. The garden stripped away illusions. Every student was taught not just to fight, but to feel 2 sense shifts in air, to hear the lies in a breath, to move like water over fire. Alaric sparred until his arms bled. He meditated until the silence screamed. He learned to disappear in plain sight, to strike without rage, to kill without ego. His favorite training was the mirror room, a chamber of angled glass and candlelight. In it, Seraphine forced her students to confront their own reflection. As they moved, one wrong twitch, and your own illusion became your downfall. There is no enemy more cunning than the one inside you, she whispered, again and again. But Alaric was different from the others. He didn't just learn, he absorbed, he adapted. His intuition sharpened beyond training. He could sense intent before a blade left its sheath. He could predict movement by the flick of a pupil. It was unnatural, and Seraphine noticed. Mentor and mystery. Late one night, Seraphine called him to the old crypt library, a place only she was allowed to enter. Dust danced in torchlight, and ancient scrolls lined the walls like forgotten secrets. There's something inside you, she said, a talent I haven't seen in decades. I only do as I'm taught, he replied humbly. No, you do what you were meant to do. She handed him a dagger, obsidian, curved and etched with a symbol unfamiliar to him, a raven pierced by a rose. This belonged to Valen Moore, the founder of the original Thorn, a man who believed killing could be an act of peace or poison. Alaric felt a chill. Why give this to me? Because, she said, her voice suddenly soft, I think your purpose lies beyond just survival. In that moment, Alaric understood. His journey was not just one of obedience, but of transformation. The garden was not his destination, it was his forge. The snow had only just begun to settle along the rooftops of Praha, dusting the Gothic spires in quiet white. To most, it was a city of scholars and saints. But Alaric had come not for beauty or books. He came for blood. This was his first sanctioned assignment outside Italia. High-value target, a nobleman named Baron Tadeusz Volkov, rumored to have betrayed a secret alliance of trading houses that indirectly supported the Thorn. Intelligence said Volkov was in league with the Order of the Daggered Aja, rival syndicate with no code, only ambition. Alaric was prepared. What he wasn't prepared for was the presence of Kateran Dur, a familiar stranger. She appeared like a memory sharpened by danger. He had only glimpsed her once in Firenze, the messenger in the scarlet veil. But here in Praha, she was different. Dressed in a hunter's leather, daggers strapped to her thigh, she moved through the frozen shadows like a ghost. And she wasn't there to help, she was there for the same target. Their eyes met atop the clock tower overlooking the Baron's estate. For a moment, neither moved. She tilted her head, slightly respect, recognition, and warning, all in one glance. Then she vanished. Alaric followed. The mission on Ravel Spreha was a maze of ancient streets and underpasses. Beneath the city, a warren of tunnels served as both hiding place and history. Alaric shadowed her movements, watched how she evaded the guards with elegant precision, saw how her silence matched his own. At the final hour, as Baron Volkov stood alone in his study, they struck at the same time. 2 daggers stopped inches from his throat. He gasped. They froze. And in that pause, the Baron smiled. So he said, they finally send you both. The trap snapped shut. Crossbows emerged from hidden panels. Dozens of black-cloaked figures poured in. Mercenaries. Not elite, but enough. Alaric and Kateran stood back to back, the tension of survival thick between them. Truce, she whispered. He nodded. Until he's dead. The fight was chaos, a flurry of blades, shattered glass, and blood. Katerin fought like a dancer spun from fury, Alaric like the wind turned sharp. Together, they escaped through the library windows, down a snow-slick roof, and into the river, freezing, breathless, alive. A dangerous alliance that night, in the ruin of an old chapel outside the city. They sat across from one another by firelight. Words came slowly. Distrust still lingered. "Who do you kill for?" Alaric asked. Katerin stared into the flames. "Not for coin. Not anymore." "Then why?" "Because some systems can only be dismantled from within." Alaric understood that truth more than he wanted to admit. She tossed him a token, a black feather carved in obsidian. "A sign of the Pact," she said. "Not Thorn, not I, something older." "The Pact of Ravens," she explained, "was an ancient alliance of rogue assassins. Historians and scholars who believed the Great War of Shadows was no longer sustainable. They sought balance, not dominance. And Baron Volkov had once been part of it before he betrayed them." "You killed a traitor," she said, "not just a target." Alaric stared at the token in his hand, the obsidian feather cold and heavy. Something shifted in him that night. The mission had changed, not just in outcome, but in meaning. The kill had not been about loyalty to the Thorn. It was about something deeper, choosing which legacy to carry forward. And for the first time, Alaric questioned if the code he had sworn to truly served the world, or only those who controlled it. The mountains of Lucerne, Switzerland, loomed like sleeping titans under a slate-gray sky. Wind howled across the frozen lake, sweeping snow across ancient stone. It was here, in the shadow of the Benedictine cloister of St. Remigius, that Alaric sought answers. He came not as an assassin, but as a pilgrim. After the mission in Praha, and his strange alliance with Katerin, something inside him had shifted. The obsidian feather from the Pact of Ravens weighed more heavily than any blade. He needed clarity, and Seraphine had once told him, "If you want to question the code, you must begin where it was first broken." The cloister sat on the edge of the world, half buried in snow and silence. It was said that those who entered either found peace or never returned. The monk with no name inside. He was met by a weathered man dressed in a plain robe, white beard tumbling like snowdrifts down his chest. He introduced himself simply as Brother Seelan. His eyes were old, not tired, but deep, like someone who had once seen through the veil and decided to turn away. "You don't belong to the Thorn anymore," Seelan said without preamble. "You carry a different shadow now." Alaric hesitated. "I still follow the code." Seelan shook his head. "No, boy. The code follows you, and that's what frightens them." Alaric showed him the feather. The monk took it gently, as if holding something alive. "You've stepped into the current of something ancient," Seelan said. "The Pact of Ravens was formed by those who once wrote the code, not to kill, but to protect balance. The Thorn corrupted it. The Eye perverted it. Only fragments remain. The lost text over the next few days." Seelan introduced Alaric to the Codex Mortalis, a hidden manuscript believed lost to time, locked behind a stone altar, bound in leather cured from an age-long past. The Codex was not a guidebook for assassins. It was philosophy on ethics, control, power, and the price of silence. Alaric read passages aloud. "To take life without purpose is to become death itself. But to preserve life through shadows is to embody the divine." Another line struck deeper. "The hand that holds the dagger must first hold the heart." He began to understand that the original code of the Thorn was not about dominance, nor execution. It was about intervention, stopping those whose ambition threatened peace, but never letting killing become an identity. Somewhere along the way, that had been lost. Revelation in silence one night, in the monastery garden overgrown, wind-blown, but sacred. Alaric sat beneath a bare tree and thought of his victims, his teachers, Seraphine and Katerin. He closed his eyes and heard them whisper in the wind. He was not afraid of dying. He was afraid of killing without remembering why. brother Selan appeared beside him and sat without a word. After a while, the monk said, "Will you carry the truth back into the dark, or will you let it die here?" Alaric didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, he descended the mountain with the codex copied and hidden, a new resolve forged in silence. The path ahead was no longer about loyalty to a guild or a blade. It was about restoring balance to a world where shadows had grown too thick, too loud, too blood-soaked. He would follow the code, but his code. The road to Firenze was no longer the same for Alaric. As he passed through the sun-drenched valleys and olive groves of Tuscany, he felt a kind of calm that hadn't touched him since his boyhood, before fire, before the blade, before the silence. But he also knew peace was fleeting. He was returning not to serve the thorn, but to confront it. When he entered the city under the cover of night, cloaked and hooded, the streets whispered warnings. The thorn had changed. There were rumors of internal divisions, sudden disappearances, strange silences from once powerful voices. And Seraphine had not called him back. Something was wrong. And in the sanctuary of the Villa Morente, where secrets were stored beneath marble floors and burning torches, he found her, Caterandur. This time she wore no disguise. She stood by a fire in a red velvet tunic, her black hair loosely tied, face free of masks. She looked at him with no fear, only recognition. "I hoped you'd come," she said. "I didn't know where else to go." Alaric replied honestly. They stood in silence, the firelight dancing between them. Neither had to explain what they had seen since their last parting. The weight of their shared path was already understood. The unfolding plot. Cateran had been living in the ruins of the Thorn's alliances, through her network within the Pact of Ravens. She had uncovered a devastating truth. The Thorn's leadership had fractured. Some elders sought to return to the original code, but a faction led by a power-hungry former protege named Lucian wanted domination. "He wants to unify all assassin orders," she told Alaric, "under his own rule. Thorn, even remnants of the old Nightcloaks. He sees himself as a necessary tyrant. And Seraphine, she's missing. Rumors say she opposed Lucian and disappeared 3 days later." That word again, disappeared. In the world of shadows, it rarely meant survival. Together, Alaric and Cateran pored over maps, messages, and encoded scrolls. They traced Dro's movements across Milan, Vienna, and Bruges. His influence was spreading fast, and all signs pointed to one conclusion: he would strike next at the ancient sanctum of the original Thorn, buried somewhere in the Alps. But first, they needed time. A moment in the mountains, they retreated to an abandoned fortress nestled in the Alps, high above the world. For the first time in years, Alaric allowed himself to stop watching his back. And in that stillness, something else began to grow. At night, they sat by a wood-burning stove, steam rising from mugs of wine and herbs. She told him of her childhood in Hamburg, of losing her brother to a thorn mistake. He told her of the fire that took his family, of Seraphine's hand pulling him from the wreckage. "We've both been shaped by ghosts," she whispered. "But we don't have to become them," he replied. They trained by day and slept near each other by night, not touching, not rushing, just being, just healing, until one night, under a sky bursting with stars, they finally broke the barrier. Their kiss was not urgent, it was reverent, a promise made not in words, but breath and warmth. It wasn't the kind of love sung by minstrels or praised by poets. It was something deeper, earned, not found, and in a world of deception and death, it felt like rebellion. The decision by the end of the week. They had made their choice. They would not just resist Dro, they would expose him, using the Codex, Mortalis and Cateran's network. They would deliver the truth to all factions, prove that Dro was rewriting the code for his own power. But it would be dangerous. A battle of shadows and secrets that could either free the assassin world or destroy it forever. Together, they left the safety of the fortress. Together, they walked into the fire. The wind over Geneva carried a sharpness that no cloak could block. It was the kind of wind that whispered warnings to those who still listened. Alaric and Cataran had arrived in the city under false names, their message hidden inside a copper scroll, sealed with wax, bearing the symbol of the original thorn. Their goal was clear: infiltrate the Grand Conclave, a rare gathering of all known assassin orders, called once a generation. But this time, it was Lucien Dro who had summoned them. And this time, it was a trap. The betrayal meeting took place inside the ancient Abbey of St. Martin, a fortress turned sanctuary, where the leaders of the Thorn, the Eye, and the lesser guilds once forged truces, under vaulted ceilings and stained glass shadows. The air was thick with suspicion. Lucien stood at the altar, no longer a rogue protogex, but a self-declared regent of the unified order. His voice was steady, compelling, dripping with charisma. "We have lived in division too long," he said. "It's time we become a singular force. No more scattered codes, no more rogue agents. We will bring stability and control." Some applauded, others hesitated. Alaric stepped forward. "You want obedience, not unity." Gasps followed, eyes turned. Lucien smiled coldly. "Ah," he said, the last flower of Seraphine, still clinging to dreams. Then he signaled. From the shadows came a betrayal that broke Alaric's core. Seraphine, bruised, bloody but alive, was dragged into the chamber by Thorn enforcers. She refused the vision, Lucien said. She chose exile, but exile is a kindness we no longer afford. Alaric moved before he could think. Blades sang through the air. Cataran flanked him, swift as flame. The chamber erupted into chaos, loyalties shattered, oaths forgotten. Some joined them, others attacked, and Seraphine. She pulled a hidden dagger and struck down her captor in one final act of defiance. Before taking a blow to her chest, Alaric caught her as she fell. Blood pooled between them. "You were right," she gasped. "The code must live in you." And then, she was gone. The fall begins. The rebellion spread like wildfire. Those loyal to the original code turned against Lucien. Hidden cells long believed extinct emerged from the corners of Europe, emboldened by Seraphine's death and Alaric's defiance. But Lucien was no fool. He retreated from Geneva with his blackguard elite assassins, who once trained beside Alaric and fortified himself in Montmartre, Paris, the ancestral citadel of the Thorn. Alaric and Cataran were declared enemies of the Order, wanted, hunted, but not defeated. They escaped through the crypt tunnels beneath the abbey, guided by old maps and even older allies. As they emerged into the moonlight, Alaric whispered one word: enough. No more secrets. No more loyalty to broken structures. It was time to end this. The broken Vian, the days that followed, Alaric forged his own message of vow, not to an order, but to the assassins themselves. You were never meant to serve a throne. You were meant to protect the balance, to walk the line between light and shadow. This is your inheritance, not servitude, but choice. The message spread like a spark. Across Rome, Vienna, Barcelona, rumblings of change stirred. Those who once obeyed in silence now questioned in whispers, and in Paris, Lucien watched from his high tower, fuming. He knew what was coming. He knew they were coming. They moved south, into northern Spain, leaving behind the bloodied frost of Geneva. The war within the world of assassins was heating, but Alaric and Cataran needed clarity, not chaos. They needed time to understand what would come next. Their destination was a village near Santo Domingo de la Calzada, an ancient way station on the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrimage route where the devout and the broken alike sought healing. There, hidden behind the facade of a monastery turned orphanage, was a sanctuary long forgotten by most, La Casa de Luz, the House of Light. It was where former assassins went to vanish, the sanctuary of the fallen. The casa was unlike anything Alaric expected. There were no guards, no traps, no whispers of death in the air. Only laughter, children playing, old men tending gardens, women singing while baking bread, and in the center of it all, a man in his 80s, skin tanned like old parchment, moving with the elegance of someone who had once danced with death. His name was Esteban Rojas, a legend, a ghost of the Thorn who had vanished decades ago. It was said he once ended a war between 3 kingdoms with a single, perfectly timed assassination. Now, he taught philosophy to orphans. "You come with blood on your hands," Esteban said when they arrived. "We want to end the spilling of it," Alaric replied. Esteban smiled. "Then you are not lost, only tired." They stayed for weeks, not to rest but to remember what it meant to live. Healing in silence each morning, Alaric walked the olive groves with Cataran. They spoke of dreams, not strategies. They planted trees. They taught the children how to move without sound, not to kill, but to listen in the afternoons. Esteban sat with Alaric under a fig tree and asked the questions no mentor had ever dared to ask. "Do you believe you were meant to be a weapon?" "No," Alaric said, "but I believed I had no choice." "Then you're ready." He handed Alaric a scroll, ancient, brittle, sealed in wax with a forgotten crest. Inside, the names and locations of those who still served the original code in hiding, the ones Seraphine never got to reach, the lost seeds of the Thorn. "They'll follow someone," Esteban said, "but only if that someone knows who he is." And in that moment, Alaric understood. He wasn't just a rogue. He was a bridge between the past and a different future. The road ahead. On their final night at Casa de Luz, the villagers prepared a feast under the stars. Lanterns hung from trees, wine flowed, children danced. Even Cataran, usually guarded, let herself laugh freely, fully as the night deepened. Alaric stood before the fire and raised a glass. To those who came before, to those who come after, and to peace, earned not by the blade, but by the courage to put it down. Silence followed, deep, reverent, then applause, then tears, and the next morning, as dawn painted the mountains gold, Alaric and Cataran left the Casa de Luz behind, not as fugitives, as pilgrims of purpose. Their next stop would be Paris. Their final stand awaited. Paris, under the silver gaze of the full moon, looked almost too peaceful. Its cobblestone streets and Gothic towers glistened under recent rain. But Alaric knew better. Atop the sacred hill of Montmartre, nestled within the ancient ruins of the Thorn's original Parisian citadel, Lucien Dro had made his fortress. There, within walls built before the 100 Years' War, he gathered his most loyal followers, blackguard assassins trained in silence, raised in cruelty. It was here the final oath would be tested and broken. The alliance reforged over the past weeks. Alaric and Cataran had awakened something powerful. Former assassins from across Europe, once scattered, hiding, or Resindbeg, together under a single banner, not of conquest, but of code. Among them, Brother Celan, the monk who once guided Alaric in Lucerne, Isidora of Marseille, who trained Cataran in poisons, now reformed and wise. Even Gavrik, a Thorn enforcer from Vienna, who had defected after Seraphine's death. Together, they formed the Covenant of Balance, rebirth of the true purpose of the assassin's craft: to protect without enslaving, to watch without ruling. They would not destroy the Thorn, they would cleanse it. The infiltration Montmartre was not a fortress of brute force, it was a maze of illusions, traps, and deception. Cataran led the infiltration, slipping through tunnels beneath the Saker Seer, while Alaric took a frontal approach, walking openly into the lion's den he was expected. Lucien greeted him with mock warmth, standing atop a marble staircase, beneath flickering torches. "You've come to finish what Seraphine started," Lucien said. "No," Alaric replied. "I've come to start what she couldn't finish." Lucien drew his blade, then bleed for it. the battle began. The war within wall, steel clashed against steel in the catacombs and chambers of the citadel. Whispers of death became screams. For every blade Lucian threw at Alaric, a memory came of Firenze, of Serafini, of the Garden of Blades. Cataran fought alongside Alaric, moving like a shadow that refused to fade. Together, they dismantled the blackguard. One by one, the defenders of tyranny fell not with cruelty, but with clarity. Lucian, cornered in the grand hall, faced Alaric alone. "You've destroyed centuries of order," Lucian hissed. "No," Alaric said. "You did that when you turned protection into power." Their duel was brutal, poetica dance of equals turned adversaries. Lucian was skilled, merciless, unrelenting, but he lacked one thing: purpose. With a final twisting strike, Alaric disarmed, blade at his throat. "Finish it," Lucian spat. But Alaric lowered the blade. "I don't need to kill you," he said. "The code doesn't need your death, just your end." Lucian was taken, not slain. A new precedent. Mercy over vengeance. The oath reborn in the courtyard of the citadel. As dawn broke over Paris, the Covenant of Balance stood united. The original scrolls of the Codex Mortalis were displayed for all. Alaric stepped forward. "This is not the end of the thorn," he declared. "This is its rebirth." Cheers did not erupt. Instead, silence. Powerful, reverent. The kind of silence only truth could earn. And in that moment, Alaric took no title, no crown, no throne. He simply passed the obsidian feather to a young apprentice in the crowd, a girl from the streets of Lyon, eyes wide with hope. "The code belongs to you now," he said. It was spring again in Tuscany. The hills rolled with green, the vineyards stirred under soft breezes, and the air smelled of rosemary and earth. In a modest stone cottage nestled between olive trees, Alaric Valen awoke to birdsong, not bells, and for once, there was no dagger beneath his pillow. The war was over. The code had changed. But his life there, life had just begun. A life reclaiming a Terran, tended to the garden in the early morning sun, her hands covered in soil, her hair loose, and wind. She had chosen this place as their sanctuary, and Alaric had agreed without hesitation. The cottage had no guards, no hidden passages, no secret signals. It had windows that faced the sunrise, and laughter inside its walls. They had married quietly, no ceremony, no rings, just a whispered promise beneath an old olive tree. Not for tradition, for truth. Some days, Alaric taught local children how to read maps. Others, he walked the hills alone, listening to the silence not as a threat, but as a companion. He no longer feared the quiet. He had become it. The world. They changed. News arrived by Raven, just like in the old days. But now, the messages were hopeful. In Prague, the Order of the Daggered I had dissolved, its members dispersing to rebuild cities and protect vulnerable communities. In Vienna, Gavrik had opened a school not for assassins, but for diplomats. And peacekeepers. In Marseille, Isadora worked in a clinic, healing rather than harming. The Covenant of Balance remained, not as rulers, but as guardians. They swore no allegiance to kingdoms or gold, only to peace. A new generation was rising, trained in discretion, honor, and compassion. They carried no names, only causes. And when they struck, it was never for pride but for balance. A final visit one morning, Alaric and Cataran received a visitor, a young girl, no more than 16, wearing a faded cloak and carrying an obsidian feather. "I was told you'd know what this means," she said shyly. Alaric smiled. "I do." He welcomed her inside, made tea, and listened to her story. She didn't come to learn how to kill. She came to learn why not to, and how to protect without becoming a shadow herself. He looked to Cataran, who nodded gently. Their legacy had begun. The last whispered that night, Alaric walked to the olive tree and sat beneath it, just as he had when Seraphine first told him of the code. The stars above twinkled like distant memories. He closed his eyes and whispered not to the ghosts of his past, but to the quiet future ahead. We were never meant to be feared. We were meant to be forgotten, so the world could sleep, not in fear, but in peace. And in the silence that followed, Alaric Valen smiled, not because he had survived, but because, for the first time, he had truly lived.